Shabbat Shalom. Everyone or anyone who has studied Torah knows of the distinction between Torah Shebichtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, the written law and the oral law, and how many discussions we have in the Talmud and in later literature trying to decide whether a certain rule is midoraita or midorabanan, and the implications, which can be far-reaching in regard to a matter of doubt, where it would be more concerned to impose the Torah Sheba'al Peh, more willing to relent with regard to Torah Shebichtav. But at the same time, there is a strong current in rabbinic thought which aims at blurring the distinction between Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebichtav, blurring to the point beyond recognition that they were all really part of the same revelation. For whatever reason, some were written down in the Torah, and some were left to be explained later on by Moshe Rabbeinu or by the rabbis. And this is found already in the Gemara in Sota, which tells us, Kol mitzvot Torah, ne'emru leMoshe b'Har Sinai, klalotehem, ufrotehem, v'dikdukehem, v'nishnu mehen b'ol moed. It says later on that this was something that was taught by Moshe or given to Moshe in Ol Moed. It doesn't mean that it didn't come down at Sinai. At Sinai, we got the whole package, the overarching rule, the general mitzvah, and all the ramifications, all the branching out, all the fine details, all the paragraphs, and subsequent legislation. And the Rambam opens his commentary on the Mishnah, which is, of course, the first book of Torah Sheba'al Peh to be committed to written according to the Jewish tradition, by saying that at Sinai, Moshe again received four things: the Torah Shebichtav, but also what he calls in Arabic the tafsir, meaning the basic fundamental explanation of the words or the basic rules, the ta'wil, meaning the deeper meaning, everything that this perfectly constructed verse contains. So we have this tendency to blur the distinction, and the Rav Soloveitchik, in his shiurim, his wonderful shiurim in Sefer Mitzvot, and of the Rambam, and the criticism of the critique of the Ramban, makes this point over and over again, that the distinction, which is an important legal rule, is not at all clear. And certainly from a theological point of view, there's really no difference at all. They are all, the Torah Sheba'al Peh is no less binding, normative, critical for the Jewish tradition than the Torah Shebichtav. Now, these issues come to the fore in our Parsha Devarim, because it's been noticed by commentators well before Wellhausen, the great difference between Sefer Devarim and the other books of the Torah. In particular, that the Sefer Devarim, we don't find the mitzvot being said by the Bereshit Moshe Limot Savet B'nai Yisrael. It's as if it's not the type of revolution that we had at Sinai. And what the Meforshim tell us is that basically in his farewell address, which we find in Sefer Devarim, Ela Devarim Moshe Diber Moshe, Moshe taught the Jewish people some of the parts of the Torah Sheba'al Peh that had been revealed to him at Sinai. The Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, takes us much further, makes some very daring statements. He says that basically that that Sefer Devarim began as Torah Sheba'al Peh. As we said, it was given at Sinai. It remained Ba'al Peh for nearly 40 years until Moshe explained it and then wrote it down, as it tells at the end of Sefer of Ha'azinu, that Moshe actually wrote these things down. And even after being committed to writing and becoming part of Torah Shebichtav, they remain Torah Sheba'al Peh in a certain way, because it says in our parsha, Ho'eh Moshe Be'er at the very Torah, that Moshe Be'er, this is a Be'or Torah. It's an explanation, a clarification, an elaboration of the Torah, Be'or Torah, and that's what Torah Sheba'al Peh is. And the Rav goes even further in his own inimical way and his own way which can't be imitated, and only someone of his stature could say things like this, that in the first four books of the Torah, Moshe is speaking as a prophet, simply relaying whatever words the Kadosh Baruch Hu puts in his mouth. But in Sefer Devarim, Moshe is speaking as a Rebbe. And this is a daring remark, but a wonderful remark that's worthy of the Rav. Now, there's clearly a reason for this, because throughout the generations, the great challenges that have come to the unity of the Jewish people and to the leadership of the Jewish people have been grounded in a rejection of Torah Shebaal Peh. No one who considers himself a part of the Jewish people would dare to reject the Torah Shebiktav, the revelation at Sinai, and the Ten Commandments, or whatever else they happen to believe Moshe Rabbeinu received at Sinai. But when it comes to the rabbinic authority to interpret the Torah and to legislate, that's where we've had the grifts. The Tzaddukim in the time of Bayit Sheni, about 1,000 years later, the Karaim, and now 1,000 years after that, the Reform movement. I heard once the Rav say that the Reform Jews that he knew, the Reform leaders he knew, had a method. If they felt they wanted to abolish a certain Jewish custom or law, they would first go to the effort to prove that whatever law it is they want to get rid of was midrabanan. And then if it's midrabanan, then you can dump it. And the Rav said this is totally wrong. Whatever lamdonis they may have, whatever one could try to show that a certain thing is derabanan, derabanan is no less normative, no less binding, no less an integral part of the Jewish tradition than the Torah Shebichtav. And that's why we have to defend it, as the Talmud already said, Devarim tzrichim chizuk. We have to go to extra efforts to defend the legislation that's formally speaking midrabanan. So we have to bear this in mind now as we go through again the dark period, the dark time of the year before Tisha B'Av, the dark time in our history where we have no real leadership and all sorts of destructive elements rampaging through Israeli society, getting free access to the media and impunity before the law and attacking the Jewish tradition any way they can, to recall how important all of this is and how our entire tradition includes on the same level of being normative and binding the Torah Shebichtav and the Torah Shebaal Peh. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Ve'gula Krova Be'ehera B'Yameinu. Amen.